Hello and welcome to the first ever podcast of Housing Geospatial, the podcast where we discuss anything and everything that relates to either housing and or geospatial, preferably if there's a little bit of both. Housing Geospatial was formed as we believe place matters for social housing and that geospatial information is woefully underrepresented within the housing sector. This series is around sharing a collective knowledge within the housing sector. You can either find our group on LinkedIn or feel free to visit our website at www.housinggeospatial.co.uk. I'm your host, Chris Kinnear, and for our very first episode, we are joined by the ever wonderful Rebecca Dick, who is the GIS Lead at 13 Group. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Chris.
So, first of all, how did you get involved in housing and or geospatial?
So first of all, I just want to say thanks very much for inviting me to be on this podcast. I do fully appreciate you creating this platform to spotlight the power of GIS. It's such an exciting space and very excited to share my enthusiasm with others. So in terms of my journey and how I got started, I actually first came across GIS when I was studying ecology at university. And that's where I first got my first hands-on experience with GIS. And I can always remember being in the computer labs. I was always one of the last people to leave because I was absolutely completely absorbed. However, at the time, I didn't have any idea that there was such a thing as a job in GIS, nor did I have any idea that there was a massive demand for the GIS skill across many sectors and industries. But then when I graduated and I was applying for jobs, I noticed that GIS roles were popping up here, there and all over. And I realised that one of the strengths on my CV was that GIS skill. And then I was lucky enough to land a GIS officer role at 13. I didn't have a housing background and I just remember thinking, well, houses don't move, so it'll be way easier to do GIS than when you're tracking wildlife. However, that was short-lived and housing turned out to be way more complex than I'd ever imagined. But I suppose that's why I really quickly became passionate about how GIS could help tackle real world problems in this sector, especially a sector that's so deeply tied to location. So that's really how I got into it.
Oh, awesome. So when you began, how did you get started at 13 Group?
So when I got started at 13, I was in the beneficial position over other associations where they're starting their GIS journey. GIS was already in place. We already had a platform, but it was mostly used for the likes of land ownership queries, right to buy plans and some basic hotspot mapping. And we're talking on PDFs, so very static information. But even with that limited functionality, it was in high demand and my inbox was chock-a-block all the time, especially with the simple let's map some properties. And it's actually our property map, which is still the most widely used tool across the organisation. And that's used even up to our leadership level. But then I suppose at that point, so I never undermine the basic functionality of GIS and housing, so powerful, but we couldn't just stop there. And at the time I had a manager who was incredibly passionate about the potential of GIS and housing. And he was always there to encourage me to try new things and be innovative. And that support drove me to be able to build our initial self-service applications. So that was our land ownership map and our property map. And the ability to not be responding to all those emails and people being able to self-serve freed up a lot of my time to then develop the GIS service even more. And when I do talks, I often, doing a presentation, I'll show a picture of this map. It's the A0 map, and on the top of it, it has written "Ye Oldie Map of Middlesbrough." And I found that in one of our housing offices when I first started. And I always like to look back at that and think that it's great because it shows how far we've come from those static maps all the way to self-serve apps, spatial surveys, and now we like to integrate it and integrate spatial data into all sorts of applications and our Power BI dashboards. So I really did start as a one-man band in the asset team. We were very heavily asset focused. And this is one thing I do like when you speak to housing professionals at conferences. I always like to find out where their GIS sits. It's really interesting because GIS sits right across the board, could be anywhere. But with us, we started obviously in asset, But over time, we were starting to deliver projects that had tangible benefits across a much wider range of departments. So eventually, the GIS functionality was taken from the asset team and put into the central data team. So now I lead on GIS at 13 and are supported by a really brilliant GIS technician. So yeah, we've come quite far, and I'm really pleased with what we've managed to do in our organisation.
That's awesome to hear, like how far you've come from being your one-man band, being inundated with all the emails. I think we've all been there, you know, doing really relatively simple work for what we know GIS is capable of. What then changed Geospatial at 13 Group? What propelled you to go from your little one-man band, so to speak, to becoming something brilliant like you're using today?
Yeah, so on that one, I have been really fortunate. 13 is a really great organisation with a lot of great managers and directors, and they like people who could really see the value of GIS, and they were really like confident in backing me and pushing it forward. But if I did have to pinpoint one thing that really did accelerate our geospatial journey, I would have to say it would be the grounds maintenance data. So for us, when 13 was formed, as with a lot of other organisations, it's the amalgamation of different smaller landlords, but 13 was developed from 4 different landlords from across the Tees Valley region. The grounds maintenance data we had and we'd inherited was inconsistent, outdated, and often it was incomplete. Obviously, because each organisation had its own system or no system at all. A lot of the data was siloed and it was kept within like the asset team. And even going to say myself, the accuracy was such concern that I was very wary to share it. And so that made it really difficult to share information, talk about information, and be confident that we were in what we were maintaining, and let alone whether we were getting value for money or charging accurate service costs. So we worked really closely with the grounds maintenance team and another really passionate manager in terms of GIS, and we began a comprehensive program to clean up the data. So we did engage with a data consultant, and they helped us to use satellite imagery, the Ordnance Survey master map, land registry boundaries, and a bit of good old-fashioned ground truthing. And I know that this was back in 2018, 2019, so I know there are other data sets now available that have helped like other organisations who are doing that now, but that was the data that was available at the time. But through all that, we got the full picture, and it was a really good place to start. But then we thought, well, what if we do that now, then in 5 years' time, we're going to be in the same position where we then have to revalidate. And I thought we need to get ahead of the game and make this data sustainable. So that at that point, I then built a custom GIS application. And the GIS application, it lets the grounds team manage and update the data themselves, and includes a range of built-in tools for like for instance, for changing information, editing information, and then built-in tools for calculating areas. And when you can calculate the areas of different grounds cover, we can feed that into productivity metrics and costs. But what's been really brilliant is how the benefits have gone way beyond just operational improvements, because now we have the solid spatial understanding on our open spaces, and we've been able to use that data to support everything from accurate procurement to contract management to seasonal planning and resource allocation. And it's even started to inform our environmental initiatives. So we've been able to quantify carbon impact, access land for habitat improvement, and then start to think more strategically about how we use green spaces to support broader environmental goals. So yeah, this is why I always think the GIS is the kind of the key to success of GIS in an organisation, particularly in housing, because it's been a really great example for us to always use to show how solving one operational issue with GIS can open doors to a much wider strategic impact. And it really was the springboard for us for getting GIS noticed in 13. So it was really good. And that's why I'm still talking. We did this in 2017, 2018, and here 5 years later, I'm still absolutely buzzed about it.
That sounds really awesome, and it sounds like how grounds maintenance seems to be quite a common theme when you chat to other GIS people as well. The fact that you could accurately calculate the areas for your contract management makes contract management better. And did you find that you were able to allocate better, so you were able to do service charging far more accurately, for example?
Yeah, so because we have that info, we can look and see exactly what it should cost in terms of, we've even like further enhanced it now to not just have different types of grass. So we have our grass, it's open access, you can ride on a big lawnmower, to the grass where it's restricted access, where it would take a bit longer. So we can be really, really intuitive about what it would cost to maintain that land, so that we can reflect that back to the customer. And any queries that we get from a customer can be explained. And it's just really powerful to be able to do that.
That's awesome. Like, to be able, that transparency with tenants is just so paramount to everything going around with service charging at the moment.
Yeah.
I want to kind of digress from grounds maintenance for the moment, but you built a community map which was nominated for a collaborative working award at the ESRI Customer Success Awards in 2023. Can you tell us more about that map and how you're using it over at 13?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, so our community map has been one of our most impactful GIS projects to date. So what it is, it's a web-based mapping tool that brings together a really wide range of spatial data, which helps us to support our communities and also helps our community team to deliver on that community resilience strategy. So being shortlisted for the ESRI award really did validate all the hard work that had gone into it. So our resilience strategy, it's all about supporting and empowering local communities. And this is like, the strategy is spanning over a 5-year period. And it really focuses on engaging with communities and supporting them to be thriving and resilient places, helps them address challenges in the areas, and leverages like community partnerships. So GIS enabled us to gain that deeper insight into those communities and build evidence of community need, what the strengths of those communities were, what the opportunities were in those areas, and then priorities. So all of that then enables our community team and business growth to tailor the approach to different places. So what we did was we designed a community map, and the community map, it's basically a one-stop shop for spatial intelligence. It includes data on our stock and assets, on our investment where we're developing, so internal data, but then we also delve into the more open source data, such as like census, demographic information, deprivation indices, then amenity information, local services, schools, GP surgeries, parks, and then we've got a range of data sets that come from community partners and like our local authorities. And what that does is it gives us a really rich and holistic view of a place. So to start with, the initial use was we used GIS to identify those areas of high demand. So we were looking at demand on our services, so looking at the likes of tenancy terminations, voids, rent arrears, and like antisocial behaviour. And we were able to flag hotspot areas where demand was higher. And then using the spatial filters and all the data that we had available to us, we could dig into each area to understand the potential underlying causes, but also the opportunities for change. And it's that whole thing of like, no one community is the same. So being able to really thoroughly understand each location, we were able to really tailor our approach. And the impact has been really powerful. So it's not just the GIS theory, there's been a bunch of real tangible ways that we've seen the benefits. So for instance, really good stuff on building social connections through our community connectors. So enabling them to get a good knowledge of where existing services are so that we can reduce duplication. We've been able to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour. So for example, in one neighbourhood where antisocial behaviour was consistently high, we were able to use the GIS layer to that mapped out reports of incidents to the police, and create a compelling case to install new CCTV cameras and lighting and some like security fences. So it really does help even with like stuff like that. And then in another area, the map highlighted that there was a need for youth provision. So the community team were able to work with local partners to publicise what the existing services were, and then which include the funding of youth activities, looking for where the gaps were. But also what they did there was they relocated some underused sessions to where young people actually were hanging out. And even then the community team's been able to support with donating gaming and arts and craft equipment to basically boost engagement. Other things that they can do with the map is improving the environment. So there's a lot of cleanup projects. So the map is also, and the community strategy is also about uplifting whole communities. So we've used the insights to support places where we should be cleaning up and have big cleanup days. So go from litter picking, alleyway makeovers, establishing community gardens and repainting fencing. So a lot of it is very heavily driven by what the community is looking for, but also heavily involving those people who are members of the community. So it's not 13 going, we're going to come and do this. It's we're going to come in and support you to do this. And then there was other things where we've had congestion, where car parking was causing tension, and we're being able to facilitate the creation of new parking bays, which eases that congestion. And then final couple of things, of tangible things that we've seen. So employability, we're able to overlay our current employability offer alongside population demographics, unemployment data from not from the census, from the Office of National Statistics. And we can then see where we've got, and also actually demographic data, and we can start to see where we've got gaps, where perhaps we haven't put the adequate support in, or perhaps where we definitely see opportunities where we can support our areas. And that means that we can effectively target where we put employability surgeries. And then if we wanted to partnership with local schools like we have in some areas, we're able to pinpoint which ones. And then also supporting customers through cost of living. So for instance, we've been able to put targeted advice in place, which involves support for certain areas from our community team, tenancy support teams, employability teams and housing. And other things that I've seen in areas have been able to support low-cost food hubs. So hubs that existed, that you've been able to support existing places. And then there was a scheme of cooking on a budget. And I think it's a 4-week slow cooker course. And also, which was really good. And then also other things we've done during the winter has been able to launch warm space hubs within local communities for residents over the colder winter months. So I suppose there's a huge list of things that they're doing. That's just scratching the surface. But what's really been great is to see how it's the community teams and business growth teams able to self-serve using the GIS map. So they're able to use geospatial data to plan interventions, collaborate with partners, and then build stronger funding bids. Because they have that evidence at their fingertips, the support they provide is more targeted and impactful. And I suppose as a GIS professional, you sit behind your computer and tap away at the keyboard, and you don't often really get to hear the benefits. So it's been really lovely to be able to hear about all the great things that the team does, and with the support of that geospatial data.
It seems like one real key advantage that you're saying, and kind of this is I think how a lot of GIS people feel, is that democratization, the self-empowerment to allow self-service. That sounds like such a key driver for what's led to a really successful map at 13.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I think it's that ability to when you want some data or you want some insight, instead of I suppose previously it would have come into my inbox and sat in the queue. By the time it would get to me, it was delayed. Whereas the self-serve thing, it's kind of the data is instantly there, instantly accessible in a really I suppose GIS majorly friendly platform to be able to look at and analyze the information. So it's just the key nuggets of insights are right there immediately. It's just brilliant.
So you said you were working with police to identify crime spots, ASBs, where I think using that data and working with local forces to know where to install extra lighting and extra cameras, I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other services that work with you or provide data to you, or you communicate, like healthcare providers or fire service or local councils? Are any of those sectors working with you?
So our community team does work closely with like other community forums. In terms of one thing that we do want to kind of delve a bit further into, and I know there's information out there, it's that the kind of the health data. We don't have a lot on there aside from the kind of census information, but it would be really good. That would be a really good like place to kind of improve the map. But yeah, we take data on like fly tipping and receive data from like community hub forums, which do include like emergency services, local councils, and our community teams sit on those like panels and are able to kind of use the information that they have and our knowledge of our internal data to be able to sit and it like I suppose influence their involvement.
That's awesome. I particularly like the cleaning projects that you have going on. I think that's a really good way of bringing communities together to do combined litter picking, the alleyway painting, and the gardening. I think those three that you said earlier on, I think are brilliant.
Yeah, because I
So
think even on that, there's been like in some areas where we've provided tools, provided like training hubs for this is if you wanted to maintain your garden, here's some easy tips and tricks. So yeah, it's been really, really good.
oh, that's awesome. So have you got any future projects you're working on at 13?
Oh, so in terms of what we're working on at the moment, I just cover three things I think that are quite exciting. And so I've really enjoyed recently been diving into biodiversity and habitat mapping. So that's not just like what do we have now, but also how do we look at that and how do we kind of track changes? So when we're doing something that we think is that's really good for the environment, how do we then like later on track that and see the tangible difference? So what we want to do is create that baseline quality check of our open space land. So we are currently in the process of investigating what information is out there, what we can use. And we have on that one, we've partnered with a student from the University of York, and they're starting in a couple of weeks' time, are going to be writing their dissertation by consultation with us. And they're going to be exploring like satellite-based habitat assessments and able to like grade our land based on its ecological quality, but also kind of like pulling in the likes of the habitat connectivity across the wider region. So then we'll be able to look and say which key areas, if we were going to put improvement or put a green space strategy in place, where would be our absolute key areas to focus on. So that's been really exciting. Ed on my team, he's been looking really closely at subsidence and particularly tree related subsidence. It was also pulled in information on historic mining activity, soil structure, property age. And then we've been looking at comparison to internal data sets to see where we've had past occurrences. And this is basically to build up a picture of where we might likely see subsidence in future years, particularly when it comes to that increased risk due to climate change. And it will also add into our wider work that we've been doing on environmental risk for the environment team and the asset team. So we'll be looking at like overheating potential and like flood risk. And I suppose we're just in the early stages of that. And I suppose with the biodiversity one as well. And if there was anybody who was listening to this from the housing background who's done anything in these two areas, it would be really good to touch base, just to kind of like a bit of a sounding board would be really good. And just to hear about other people's approaches so we know we're kind of heading in the right direction. But I think the other big one and final big one is the One Map. So One Map is a collaboration that we're currently undergoing with other housing associations across the Northeast. So it's all part of the SHINE group, which is the Social Housing Innovation Northeast. And the One Map tool is a region-wide mapping tool to help us give a shared view of our housing stock. So what I like to think of it as, it's kind of like our community map, but with the added benefit of that whole-scale collaboration on a region level. And we currently are still in the rollout, but I think we're already getting the feeling for how powerful it's going to be in terms of like joined up investment, tackling antisocial behaviour, and then the response to health inequalities, which is kind of what I was saying before about how we don't have much data from like the NHS, but we're looking at how we can bring that in. And I suppose that was all driven by the fact that we're all kind of operating in an area that, and we do overlap each other. So there's this map that I created a while back that got a lot of traction, and it was like a 1 kilometre square grid of Hartlepool. And we found that within that grid, there was like 8 landlords. So you could walk past 8 different social landlords within 15, 20 minutes. And then the other one that we've got, as well as a snapshot of Thornaby, which is in Stockton-on-Tees, and there's 3 landlords which have a substantial number of properties, and we're all operating side by side. And I suppose that's where it's kind of like says like the collaborative approach is really powerful, and there will be smarter decision making through shared geospatial insight, as well as reducing the duplication. And the other benefit of it is we've created a Shine GIS Club. So not only are we developing this one map, but we're also we now have a nice forum to share learnings and solve problems together, and it's been really good. We had a little Christmas party; it was brilliant. So I suppose on this one, all I'd say is if you are a GIS professional within the Northeast and aren't part of Shine or the Approach to One Map or the GIS Club, it would like be really good to hear from you. Would love to have you on board, because more people, more ideas, it just would be really useful.
I think the collab approach is absolutely stunning. I've heard because Shine won an innovation award recently, didn't it, for its collaborative approach, and I think it was One Map as well, wasn't it, that won the award for?
It was, yeah. So Lindsay from Believe Housing, who has been basically leading on this project, yeah, she won for innovation with this tool, but it's brilliant.
I really like the concept of it. I think housing associations working together, when I was at my former housing association in London, you could walk down a street, like you said, and there's multiple housing associations on a single road, that sharing of knowledge and information, I think it's going to be vital in the next couple of years. I'm going to ask one more question, and this is going to be a fun one, I promise. If you could have almost like an unlimited budget, unlimited time, but what's something that you would love to be able to investigate or create a project on, or because obviously you produce some amazing things and you're looking at some awesome things at the moment, but if you kind of had a choice of anything you could pick from, what do you think you'd choose to research or produce or anything of that ilk?
I think that's a tricky one, because I suppose for myself, you look at your local authorities and you go, oh, wow, how amazing it would be to work at a local authority where you have full access to the public sector data for free. So I think for myself, it would be, I probably would still go down the lines of that environmental risk biodiversity, but without, I suppose, unlimited budget, you'd be without the kind of like the limitations of what data you can get access to, like in terms of like satellite imagery, all OS products are now available. There wouldn't be that kind of like, oh, which piece of data is really valuable, which ones are we going to purchase, which ones we aren't, because we just have unlimited. So yeah, I think it would probably be, I probably wouldn't have anything crazy to think about, but I'd just say like doing what we're doing without the limitations would be like wonderful. I don't have any plans to go to local authority just yet, but I do like that public sector government agreement.
Yeah, I've been talking to a couple of others and I've had some pretty good answers so far. And I thought, but actually you're one of proper mapping with biodiversity and having the funds to be able to use aerial imagery, and completely agree. I think that's a brilliant one. I think that's all we've got time for today. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us and to be able to share your learning. And to everyone listening, thank you so much for listening to our first podcast. And yeah, keep in touch for our next one. Thank you very much and have a good day.